All right, over the last 20 years, Tim Cook has read tens of thousands of soldiers' letters and diaries, delving deep into a side of war that many Canadians might not know about. Their words form the backbone of his book, The Secret History of Soldiers. It unearths how Canadian soldiers dealt with the horror of war, how they pushed back with songs, skits, art, even their own trench newspapers. As we head into Remembrance Day on Sunday, Tim Cook is here to share that secret history. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for this book.
All right, thank you.
Now, most history books focus on commanders or the broader battles in which they led their troops. You don't do that. You focus on the daily lives of the men in the trenches, the secret culture that most of us didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
Why did you want to hone in on that aspect of war?
Well, for me, the question has always been, how did they survive? How did they cope and endure? This was a horrendous war. The unending shell fire, the snipers, the chemical agents, the dirt, the deprivation. I've always wondered, how did these young guys deal with this? And so I began to read their letters, their diaries, and I've done this for 20 years. Thousands of letters, these eyewitness accounts, poignant stories from the soldiers who were there, some of them 18, 19, 20 years old. And I began to see these patterns. They were talking about their songs, their poetry, superstitions, ghost stories, trench newspapers. And I began to see there's a secret society here.
Let's talk about these trench newspapers. I'm picturing in my mind a printing press that is creating these newspapers and these stories. How did they come to be? What were they all about? What was in them?
Yeah. Well, this was an army of citizen soldiers, right? In the First World War, 630,000 Canadians enlisted, 1 in 3 adult males. Wow. It's an incredible story from across our country, English Canadians, French Canadians, New Canadians, Indigenous. They have editors, they have journalists, and amidst the warfare, the carnage, the death, there's this great creative spirit, and so they begin to publish these newspapers. And some of them are 2, 3, 4 pages. Some of them are 48 pages.
Wow.
And they contain their jokes and their cartoons, and there's pushback against the officers. They're making fun of officers. All of this is very different than what I would have expected in this war. I mean, this was a war of great discipline, but here are these guys really showing this creative spirit.
Let's talk more about that creative spirit, because it wasn't just about the newspapers. It was about the skits and the jokes. There were even theater troops. As you said, I'm guessing with 1 out of 3 Canadians, you're bound to have a few theatrical types.
That's it.
And how did they entertain the troops?
Yeah. So at first, of course, they don't have formal entertainment. And the officers are wondering, is this proper soldiering? Should we be having theater shows? But it becomes so popular with the soldiers. And they eventually have 30 touring shows. The Dumbbells will eventually tour Canada after the war. They're singers, they're entertainers, they're putting on skits, there's cross-dressing. And, you know, all of this I was reading.
And this was they were developing these shows on the front.
Yeah, on the front, right behind the lines. They would talk about the soldiers having fought in a battle, coming back, having a day to rest, and then they would go right into these theater shows. Some of the guys suffering from shell shock, and the entertainers are just giving it. They're trying to keep up the spirits.
You know, what I know about the First World War is just how traumatic trench warfare turned out to be, and you referred to shell shock or PTSD today. A lot of this must have been coping mechanisms for these men on the front. But you said another coping mechanism was believing in superstitions. Right. Talk to me about what that means.
Yeah. Well, they're a deeply superstitious group. They live in a site of tremendous violence, really a mass murder. Friends are being killed around them every day, and so they're deeply superstitious. They have ways of doing things. They have...
they didn't bring money onto the front.
They don't
that was
bring
bad
money.
luck.
That's right. All of these things, they all carry magic charms. This is not surprising if people are played sports or things in a place of fate and chance, but it's magnified here, of course. They have ghost stories. I kept coming across spectral beings who had saved soldiers, a premonition, soldiers talking about seeing their own death. And these are, of course, a second soldier talking about their comrade. So there's this world of superstition and death, and I try to make sense of that. I try to understand it, and I think you can if you think about 60,000 Canadians killed on the battlefield, a place of tremendous destruction. But here are these young guys struggling to survive.
Tim, you know, it's when we talk about a world war, when we talk about something that big or the number like 60,000, it's easy to be disconnected from it. This book brings those stories down to a human level, an individual level, a personal level. Very easy to connect. So thank you very much for this book. We really appreciate it, especially at this time of year.
Thank you very much.